everyone. It is 1 o'clock on July 7th. It is time for our regularly scheduled budget workshop. It's good to see everybody. I believe that Commissioner Porter will be participating via WebEx. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do we have Commissioner Porter on the line? I see her name.
Can y'all hear me?
We can. Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Porter. All right, let us move right into the agenda item. First of all, do we have any modifications for the workshop today?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, are we going to, should we have the presentation first and then take public comment?
I would recommend so, yes,
That'd be
sir.
great. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Manager.
And I'll just hand it to Robert Wiggin, our Director of Resource Management. We've got 2 hours allotted for this workshop. I think we've got about a 20-minute presentation and then public comment, commissioner feedback. So I won't belabor it and pass it to Robert.
Thank you, City Commissioners, Mayor, appointed officials, and Reese. I'll make sure the technology works. I'm sharing this screen. There we go. I can advance it now. Moving quickly through the kind of the overview of the budget. We've got a $758.3 million operating budget. The proposed general fund within that operating budget is $171.2 million, maintaining the millage rate for the 6th year in a row at 4.1 mills. We'll ask you to affirm that assumption later in the workshop. And then the capital budget is a $273 million fiscal year 22 recommendation for appropriation. That is a $1.03 billion budget. It's a large number. It's an impactful number, but we believe that with your leadership, with the strategic plan direction, that is headed in the right direction. So there's some areas that we'd like to focus on. I will say that in this last year, we're very proud that we've been designated Gold Lead City. I think would be remiss if we don't recognize that our fiscal year 21 budget and previous budgets brought us to that level. We received the APPA Top System Award for our electric utility. Water Quality Award meets the strict standards of EPA, DEP, and Florida Department of Health. We continue to be recognized for our financial acumen and our financial performance. Performance management recognition as with certifications of achievement, and our CAFR is recognized in addition to that. So again, I think 1.03 billion sounds like a large budget. It is, but it's been a successful previous year in entering this next year. So we're entering the third year of a 5-year strategic plan. While we've accomplished much, today's workshop will focus on fiscal year 22 proposed budget. Continues our successful work in utilities and public safety in a wide variety of ways that our workforce serves the community. To continue to make this progress, we're going to talk about workforce compensation and new positions, neighborhood revitalization and relief. I'll ask Amy to speak to the fiscal year 22 operating and capital budget. And then I'll ask Max to talk about some critical elements in the operating and capital budget, our reserve status, disaster cost recovery with FEMA, fire services, and then our progress in a water and wastewater rate study. At the conclusion of the workshop, we recommend adoption of a 4.1 millage rate, some authorizations for the city manager or designee to enter into contracts to implement the American Rescue Plan, and then also an opportunity to enter into an agreement with Motorola for replacement of radios in the near future. As you well know, we have reached agreements in our collective bargaining units with the PBA and with the International Association of Firefighters, and those have been ratified by all parties for fiscal year 21 through 23. Our fiscal year 22 budget represents those pay increases and those agreements. So that's one portion of our workforce. The balance of our workforce is 2,200 full-time positions 1,100 temporary positions, and another 170 other personnel services employees that we refer to as OPS employees. Again, as you're very familiar, the fiscal year 20, Floridians voted to increase the state's minimum wage from $8.56 an hour to $10 an hour, effective July 1st, and it'll increase by $1 per hour, reaching $15 by 2026, after which it'll continue to rise by inflation. This pay plan recognizes that we've had difficulty in hiring. Our lifeguards have required special attention. We've had to look at various departments to ensure that they maintain staffing levels. And the city needs to maintain our status as an employer of choice, of first choice. And so it's very important that we focus on our compensation package. Moving on to our compensation recommendation. You know, I identified full-time employees, temporary, and OPS, but I will say that there are probably thousands of classifications. Each of the 14 operating funds operates very uniquely, and so it requires specialized training, skills, and personnel. And I believe what we've presented here considers the market conditions, balances it against financial viability, and then ensures that we meet strategic planning success expectations. Our recommendation is that for all permanent general plan employees, the fiscal year 22 budget recommends a salary and benefits package focused on those making $15 to $25 per hour. That represents 1,600 of the 2,200 employees. The pay plan continues efforts to increase take-home pay for employees, and the recommended pay plan specifically recommends a 4.5% across-the-board pay increase with a guaranteed minimum of $2,500 salary increase for anyone earning less than $55,555. That's at your direction to ensure that those at the lowest wage base earn at least a minimum salary. It's consistent with our $1,000 minimum salary raises in the past. In fiscal year 21, you gave us direction that healthcare the cost sharing for healthcare should be adjusted over time to increase take-home pay. We also implemented a leave buyback in fiscal year 22. In recognition of changes in healthcare market, we are recommending a 9% increase in employee flex bucks, which equates to $177 more annually in each employee's paycheck. It allows them to make healthcare choices when they're signing up for benefits, and that's on top of the current flex bucks numbers. As I mentioned, the employee health care insurance costs for families are being shifted from a 70-30 cost-sharing split where the city pays 70%, the employee pays 30%. We're now in the second year of shifting that to an 80-20 split, and nearly there in its entirety this year. And that will realize a reduction of $976 in employee health care costs for employees with a family coverage, and on average for an employee plus one of $500. The chart to your right demonstrates this pay plan with a few pay scales. If you look at the pay types of a raise, flex pay, family health care savings, and then a take-home increase and total percent increase, in 1,100 employees that make $15 an hour, it averages out to an 11% raise, 11.7% raise. For about 525 of our employees that make just at $25 an hour, it's about a 7% raise or increase in take-home pay. And at $35 an hour, we're looking at an increase of 6.1% across the board. And those are $31,000, $52,000, and $72,000 in salary categories. This pay plan addresses larger market forces, addresses equity, it addresses compression, and ensures our greatest resource that our people make gains over time in their salaries. I will mention also that these are consistent with TPD and firefighters for across the board and healthcare and flex benefits, as well as some of the other benefits that are specific to those union contract negotiations. Another aspect, besides our full-time employees, we are making a recommendation to move 57 other personnel service employees into full-time positions. Many of the departments have a transitional plan where they bring somebody in as on a part-time basis. That person then has the opportunity to work that 20 hours, gain some experience. As they move forward and work more towards a full-time schedule, 40 hours a week, we have the opportunity to move them into an OPS position, which after 6 months means that they're earning health care also. The benefit of that is that over time they're able to get training, they're able to get certifications, they're able to get vehicle driver license classifications, and then move into a permanent position. What we're experiencing is we have low turnover. And so what we expected as these folks transitioned over time into these full-time positions is there weren't vacancies available. And so thus the recommendation to move 57 positions into a full-time position. We've spent 5 years holding the line on positions, not making changes in our total position count, moving folks among departments where there was need. We feel like to maintain the service levels in community beautification, in Star Metro, and customer services, and Parks and Recreation, that it makes sense to move these positions into full-time positions. It does require some budget capacity, and that will budget for matched annuity plan and flex bucks in 2022, and then also have to incur pension costs in 2023. I will mention, as we've talked about this, moving positions into full-time positions, it's come to our attention that we need to add a Parks and Rec amphitheater position, a tennis operations position, and then we've talked to the city attorney about a difficulty in hiring a paralegal that's on a temporary basis, and the potential for moving that to a full-time position to assist the police department. So that we present that for your consideration. Another aspect of our employment is our full-time employees, our OPS employees, and our temporary employees. I mentioned the minimum wage constitutional amendment. I mentioned market pressures. I mentioned that we have unique operations and financial constraints in our 14 operating funds. We've got career positions in accounting and line workers and engineers and large equipment operators and mechanics, but we also then fill any gaps with temporary employees. We employ about 1,100 employees for less than 20 hours a week. It's specific to the calendar and program that they're working in, and then 800 alone are in Parks and Recreation, so in our general fund. So there are key positions there. As an example, when I talk about some of the departments and their specific operations, each fund follows the best path for retention, retaining, and addressing employee needs. Golf came to our attention as an example of one where they rely upon Department of Correction employees full-time to gain experience in the work, take resume, financial classes, but also gainful employment over a full workday. At the same time, then we supplement those Department of Correction workers with temporary workers. And they range from college students to retirees or city employees who choose a secondary employment. Some of the work that they do is, after the Department of Correction personnel mow greens and do the course setup, they check in golfers, they're a starter, they're make sure the pace of play is working, they collect carts, they recharge carts, and so the tasks fit the needs at the golf course for constant work, but also meet the requirements of the employees who can't be there for the full day. They want the flexibility of being able to go to college, come in, earn some money for books and or living expenses, and then and the hours are flexible, and that they can increase or decrease the hours depending upon what their workload is in school, or in the case of some of the retirees or secondary employment, it supplements their income. I would expect might be a position for me as I retire to keep myself connected to the golf course. She sees me out there often on the weekends.
Lawn care.
Ultimately, I would love to pick up golf balls on the driving range. So ultimately, this budget recommends $10 per hour for our umpires, for our scorekeepers, for our concessions personnel, for our cashiering personnel. We've got TIFLA in those temporary positions, summer camp counselors, and all temp employees. And of course, as the minimum wage moves through its constitutional amendment stages, we will move those temporary employees also through that progress in that program. So those recommendations we feel are fair. They consider equity and balance. It's a balance between full-time employees and what they make, part-time employees and what they make, OPS employees and where we want them to move into permanent roles, and then our temporary workers. You know, as equal as that consideration is, we've been able to talk as another focus of the budget of on May 19th, the American Rescue Plan, where we discussed our implementation to recognize the needs in our neighborhoods. We want to make sure that we're supporting public health response with $1.6 million. We're addressing negative economic impacts with $16.4 million. And as you're well aware, we're doing that in our homeless shelters in partnerships with our homeless shelters with incentives for affordable housing projects, down payment assistance programs, neighborhood resilience programs. This is consistent with city and county working together to implement these programs, and is part of the authorization that we're asking for the city manager to enter into those contracts now and in fiscal year 22. Some further detail on housing and human services and community resilience. The fiscal year 22 budget, when we talk about the $16.4 million, it is layered throughout our grant programs, our housing and community resilience, our home, CHSP, CDBG, SHIP, home, and the energy services grants for a total operating and grant funds of $16.4 million in fiscal year 22. At this time, I'll ask Amy McLean to highlight the $1 billion of the total $1.03 billion budget. So I addressed about $30 million. So I had the lighter lift. Amy gets to talk about the 14 operating funds that encompass the $1 billion in operating and capital, and then followed by maxed out.
Amy, I'm going to need you to use your microphone.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As you can see displayed up there, the fiscal year 22 proposed operating budget for our 14 operating funds is $758 million. That includes $171.2 million for the general fund. These encompass all of the different missions of the city, all of the different functions. This is what it takes to provide the city's mission to be the national leader in the delivery of public service. As a service organization, as we've discussed, our employees are the service providers. The proposed budget funds the increases we've discussed, and this will help us ensure retention and recruitment of the employees that are central to our mission. The budget also includes an appropriations of American Recovery Plan funds for lost revenues estimated for fiscal year 22 in the general fund and in the sales and gas tax capital funds. And that was basically the content of that slide. Sorry. Moving on. We need to talk a little bit, as we always do, about property taxes. The proposed operating budget is proposed at the same millage rate that we've had this will be the 6th consecutive fiscal year at 4.1 mills. We did receive our certification of proposed taxable property values on July 1st from the Leon County Property Appraiser. At $13.3 billion in taxable property, that's a 3.6% increase over the prior year, which results in increase in property tax revenues in the general fund of $1.8 million. One piece of business that we have today in the workshop is, as part of the budget adoption process, the property appraiser sends a notice in late August to let people know about the hearing, the first hearing in September. That notice is required to have the proposed millage rate of 4.1 in the notice. It's not an approval, but we do like to get a consensus to make sure everybody's on board with that notice reflecting the 4.3 that we're recommending. So that will be part of the approval tonight. Further, there are, and if it were to be changed, there are options for changing the millage rate once we get to the hearing process, and there's statutory guidance that will bring us through that. I also wanted to highlight the different areas where we do have American Recovery Plan funds included in this budget. That's $5.6 million in the general fund for lost revenues. That Star Metro is receiving $4.3 million in ARP funds, and aviation is also including $3 million in ARP funds in their operating budgets. And those are from different provisions of the various federal relief. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the capital improvement plan. As we've said before, while we do update the plan annually, it is a continuous process throughout the year. We have master plans that cover 10 to 20 years. This informs the 5-year plan. Other projects have shorter planning periods and move in and out of the 5-year plan, as you'll see in the exhibit. And what we need to do continuously is review the progress on these projects, the funding, and make sure that we're always maximizing the use of the funding we have for the projects that we can accomplish. And all of these, of course, are tied to the strategic plan in terms of the services these projects will provide to the citizens. The total proposed 5-year capital plan is over $1 billion over the 5 years, and $273 million of that is proposed for fiscal year '22. As you look across this exhibit, you'll see it's somewhat sorted by size to give you an order of magnitude, and you'll see some areas where there's somewhat similar amount year over year. This represents our annual commitments to normal capital repair, replacement, and improvement. Then you'll see, as I said, other larger projects moving through this that will at times make one year look a little bit different than the other year. A good example of that is for police in fiscal year '22, we have $34.6 million, 33.3 of that is for the public safety complex. So as that moves through the budget, that will change over time, but that's a one-time project that you're all very familiar with. We do have public infrastructure for $4 million for FAMU Way, $5 million for road resurfacing. And we've also included $2 million a year to fund the Neighborhood First plans. All of the funding included in the capital improvement plan is targeted to achieve strategic plan goals, construct facilities and infrastructure that will provide service over many years, and to make capital investments in the community and neighborhoods that improve quality of life for our citizens. And unless there's any questions, I will turn this over to Max Stout, who will discuss several key topics, starting with the Deficiencies Fund and disaster recovery.
Thank you, Amy.
Mayor, Commissioners, you've heard from Robert and Amy regarding key components of the budget, such as workforce compensation, ARP funding, as well as the operating and capital budgets. Next, I'd like to highlight a handful of elements that are important factors in balancing the city's operating funds, such as maintaining adequate reserves, maximizing disaster recovery reimbursements, as well as regular review of rates for the funds. When it comes to reserves, the city follows national best practices and maintains appropriate reserves for its operating funds. This includes the Deficiencies Fund, which of course supports the general fund. The policy target for the Deficiencies Fund is currently $26.9 million, which is based on 2 months of operating expenses and allows for the city to be able to respond to emergency events or unforeseen events. In recent years, the Deficiencies Fund has been used to support emergency response activities for storms as well as COVID-19 response. And as such, the current balance is below the policy target and is expected to end the year at approximately $20.6 million. Earlier this year, a plan was presented to restore the deficiencies fund over the course of several years through the use of one-time reserves. These one-time reserves are expected to come from future real estate sales, as well as additional federal reimbursement for past storms and COVID-19 response. And so speaking of federal reimbursements, as we all know, since 2016, the city of Tallahassee has been impacted by 3 major hurricanes, hopefully, or now that we know, not a 4th, thankfully. So we've claimed nearly $50 million, or have requested nearly $50 million in reimbursement from FEMA and the state of Florida. For all 3 storms, approximately $8.2 million in additional reimbursement is still due. So this is after taking into account the local cost share of those requests. Staff will continue to work with FEMA and the state of Florida to seek the rest of those dollars, as well as any available funding that we can receive for ongoing COVID-19 recovery. Moving on to mitigation activities. The Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, or HMGP, provides funding to reduce long-term risk to people and property from future disasters. The city is working as part of the local Mitigation Strategy Steering Committee, or LMS, submitted 9 applications in 2020, and so far 6 projects representing nearly $3 million have been approved, and 1 project for over $1 million is still under review. Moving on to the Fire Services Fund. In FY20, due to the financial impacts of COVID-19, the decision was made to not implement a rate increase in FY21. In response to this, the fire department has been focused on reducing expenses and to avoid the need for any general fund transfers at year-end to balance the fund. For FY22, a rate resolution has already been passed, and new rates will go into effect October 1st. Additionally, a draft amendment to the Fire Services Interlocal Agreement is attached to your agenda materials. And this amendment accomplishes 2 items. The first of which defines the county's contribution for the their increased share in the rates, which is $1.4 million in FY22 and $1.6 million in FY23. And the second component of the amendment is the intent for the city and the county to work together to conduct a fire services rate study to be completed by FY23 with new rates to be implemented by FY24. And then moving on, the next slide is the water and wastewater rate study. Staff and its consultants at Leidos are nearing completion of the water and wastewater rate studies. While the studies have not been finalized, current projections indicate the need for a modest increase for both services. As an alternative to the system-wide wastewater rate increase, the study is also evaluating changes to the rate structure for that particular service. Now, if you'll turn your attention to the chart, this shows the impact of the expected changes on combined water and wastewater monthly residential bills and compares them with other utilities throughout the state. So this is a stacked bar graph, so the blue represents the water amount and the red represents the cost for wastewater. And then along the bottom there, along the x-axis, you have the various cities that we're comparing ourselves to, with Tallahassee thereabouts in the middle. And notably, any potential changes to these rates would not change Tallahassee's position relative to these other cities. And it's also worth mentioning that this chart does not contemplate any potential increases that other cities may be currently thinking about implementing. The final study results and recommended changes will be presented for consideration during the FY22 budget adoption in September. So with that said, I'd like to turn it back over to Robert to discuss next steps.
Commissioners, we appreciate your clear direction in the strategic plan to guide us, your leadership and acceptance of assumptions that we've made as we've gone through our fiscal year 21 analysis and our establishing assumptions for the fiscal year 22 budget and 5 prior budget meetings. The proposed budget for fiscal year 22 addresses workforce, neighborhoods, sound operating and financial standing, And then also, we've included some of the procedural steps that we will go through as we go through the today's workshop and the next two public hearing meetings. We're asking for 2 authorizations today, your vote on the millage rate, and then also awareness of some of the next steps that we'll take. On slide 20, we're asking that you authorize the city manager to expend coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. I frequently refer to it as the American Relief or Rescue Plan intermittently, but once it passed into legislation and implementation for the Treasury, it gained a new name. So we'll start to reference it as the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. Not as easy as our, but
That's a mouthful, Robert.
it is.
Anyway, longer.
And CRISPA doesn't make sense. Anyway, as the plan was adopted, as you reviewed and approved of the plan May 19th, we'll begin to enter into sub-grant agreements with fund recipients, and we'll ask for that authorization today. On slide 21, city and counties, based on coordination amongst our public safety personnel, there's an opportunity with city and county staff to meet, who have met with Motorola. They've made an offer to us to enter into new radio replacements over the next few years. That cost proposal initially was $14.9 million, with the city sharing in the cost with the county. We'll work out the details of exactly what the progress of the radio replacement will be, because it'll be phased in over time. And we're asking that you authorize the city manager or a designee to work with the county and the sheriff's office to negotiate and execute that contract with Motorola for replacement of those 800 megahertz radio systems. That full contract will be brought back for your approval on the receipt of the details. On page 22, I don't mean to scare you with the volume of the text, but it does represent the steps that we will be going through on September 8th. The city attorney is so gracious enough to walk us through 12 to 14 steps annually that have to be read into the record. This is part of the truth and millage process that was established by the state of Florida. It'll allow us to certify the tentative millage rate, identify the date, time, and location of the first public hearing. As Amy mentioned, to the Leon County property appraiser, we need to do that by August 4th. So we'll ask for that vote today. The notices will be sent out by mail, and awareness of the public hearing will also be advertised. We also advertised in the Tallahassee Democrat September 18th, 4 days before our second and final public hearing on September 22nd. And we'll follow that script September 8th. In addition to the budget adoption steps, we'll go through the adoption of the fire services fee interlocal agreement, as Max mentioned, and we've got a draft agreement attached for your initial review that has been developed by the city and county in concert with their legal department. On the last page of the presentation are the steps that we'll ask you to take. In summary, this is option 1 in your agenda item, but we stand ready for public comment and any questions that you may have.
Amy, Robert, Max, Raul, thank you. It's a wonderful presentation. I know that y'all put a lot of time and energy in preparing this budget. I think you've done a great job. Really appreciate it. Before we get to commissioner comments and questions, let's go to public comment. Mr. Clerk, will you please walk us through?
Yes, sir, Mayor. We have opportunity for public input at this time. I have 2 speakers who've submitted a speaker card. I'm taking my time as I say that in case the table outside has received additional cards. That will allow them to bring those to me and add them to our list. But each speaker will have 3 minutes for remarks. I will give you a heads up when you're at 2.5 minutes, but there is a light on the dais in front of where the commission sits for their regular meetings. And with that, I'll ask Stanley Sims as our first speaker to come forward. If you'll give your name and address for the record, he'll be followed by Kate McFall.
Thank you. Mr. Sims, thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask you in joining me in helping set the decorum and the style of this public hearing. Your name and address for the record, please, and you have 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I do promise you that I will treat you with better decor than what the city manager has treated my son.
let's try to keep it not
I
personal.
answered the
and,
question, and I
let's
will use
just-
my freedom of speech.
We're gonna.
I
we're
answered
gonna
your
speak
question.
to the
You addressed me and
issue,
you said,
please,
I hope that
Mr.
you do, and I
Sims.
answered your question. Would you like for me to proceed with my name and address for the record, for your comments?
Yes, please. But
Okay,
let's
then.
keep the comments to the chair, me. Thank you.
I'm sorry, but freedom of speech allows me to keep my comments to fall wherever they want to.
Madam Attorney, let's, please proceed. Please proceed. Your name and address for the record, please.
Can he restart the time? The time was started. Point of order, can I wait until they get through with their sidebar? Because that might be if that's about me, I'd like to know.
It's not about you. Please.
Oh, okay. My name is Stanley Sims. I'm 1320 Avondale Way. I'm the proud father of a black male that's worked for the City of Tallahassee for 4.5 And today, my son, because of his daddy's advocacy in the community, in the cold heart of our city manager who makes $236,000. For the past 10 years has averaged a raise of 15.81%. His salary has grown in 10 years, increased 140%. And my son, just like over 200 other city employees, don't make $10 an hour. Even though our city manager and our mayor like to casually say that our city employee makes $12 an hour, and even when he was elected, he called himself in a meeting just like this, correct me, stating that the city makes $12. And I proved to them, and they classified Jan right here at a city-operated facility that collects revenue. Her salary is in line with market rate. But the people who cut the grass, clean the carts, they're not making $12 an hour.
You're at 2.5 minutes.
And they're not the only ones. Parks and Rec. But my problem is, I can get why maybe a guy in beautification might be making $9 an hour because he works for the city. But when you work at a city government operated that collects funds from middle, upper class people, and the maintenance man in there making good money,
You're at 3 minutes.
director making good money,
Mr. Sims, if you could wrap up your comments, please, would be appreciated.
but in order for my son to make good money, he has to go to the IG's office.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. We appreciate it. Our next speaker, Mr. Clerk.
Next speaker is Kate McFall.
Ms. McFall, thank you so much for joining us.
They ain't be trying. The attitude.
Our next speaker, please, Ms. McFall. Your name and address for the record, please. Thank you for joining us.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yes, Kate McFall. It's 1206 Walton Drive, Tallahassee.
Give it just a second. Thank you, Ms. McFall.
Sure. Mayor Daley, Commissioners and staff, thank you. I really am here to say thank you. Appreciate several of you meeting with me, and some we have on the calendar, future meetings, so I really look forward to that. But we do really appreciate you allocating funding for the animal shelter renovations. As you know, this is a very pressing need for these updates and renovations at Animal Services, especially the dog kennels and the dog adoption ward, for the health and well-being of the animals, of course, but also for the staff, for the shelter staff. There's a large group of volunteers, advocates like me, with Animal Shelter Foundation and the shelter that also appreciate your efforts and are standing behind me. I just want to mention the possibility of accelerating the budget allocations instead of being spread out over the 4 years, because the need is so pressing. Just want to mention that in case perhaps that could be considered going forward, as they are so desperately needed. This is a great time to visit the shelter. It would be a nice perk for the shelter staff, and it'd be neat for you to see the different areas that are scheduled to be renovated. So just, of course, want to plug that, and we always like to see you out visiting Animal Services. But thank you. We look forward to working with you going forward and really appreciate you putting these funds allocated for Animal Services in the budget. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Mr. Clerk.
We have no additional speakers.
Amy, Robert, Max, we have a population of 200,000. You have put together such an incredible budget. We only had 2 public comments today. Fantastic job. Let's open it up for discussion and comments with commissioners. Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to commend staff for the work that they have done putting this budget together. As the dean of the commission and having been here for 6 years now, I can tell you this is probably one of the best, if not the best, budget presentations I've sat through, and reflects the clear direction of this commission in serving the community. I am just delighted, if I can use that term, for what we're doing for our city employees and showing the gratitude that we have for them and the work that they do, even during conditions like what we're experiencing now. Today is my neighborhood's pickup day for trash and garbage and recycling, and they're right there, doing the job that they do best. And so this budget shows them how much we appreciate the work that you all do, and how we want to fairly compensate you for that. The commission gave you that direction, and we were able to accomplish that. And I would say without a tax increase, maintaining for the 6th year now our millage at 4.1. We all should be proud of that, because we're able to provide quality services for the citizens of Tallahassee without a tax increase over 6 years now. That's pretty phenomenal. And I hope that our community appreciates its city government for that. And so, I just want to thank you all, Mr. Manager. I want to thank you for the leadership that you have provided, your leadership team, Deputy City Manager Barber, the Assistant City Managers and staff for the work that you all have done. This is phenomenal. And I hope that, our local media will broadcast this to the community so that they will know how wonderfully run this city is at this point, and how they can be proud of what their city government is doing for them on a daily basis. So again, thank you all so much, and we appreciate the work that you've done in putting together this budget for fiscal year 2022. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a motion in there as well, Commissioner?
There is a motion that we adopt staff recommendation on option number 1.
Okay, it's been properly moved for staff recommendation on option number, and that would include 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, and 1E, which is the recommendation, correct, Mr. Manager?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
It's been properly seconded by Commissioner Williams-Cox. Commissioner Williams-Cox for comment?
Yes, I also want to say thank you to the team for, one, making it to me very clear that you heard what we had to say. We wanted our employees to be rewarded, awarded for sticking it out with us through COVID, and being able to not only stick it out with us, but as I always say, loyalty is one thing, but when you get to Winn-Dixie or Publix, you better have something else. And what we're seeing here is that our employees will take home more. And as at the last budget meeting, I asked to let's take a look at what $15 an hour for each employee, what it looks like. And thank you for bringing back what it looks like, because I didn't say without raising taxes, but you already knew that. That was part of it. Because you could have brought it back with everybody, making 15, doing whatever, but you knew that the cap was, or the ceiling was, you couldn't go beyond the millage, because I wasn't on the commission when that was attempted some years ago, but I was in the audience, and let me tell you, it got ugly. It got real ugly. Yeah. I was praying for you because you were there, right? That's why you get to be the dean, because you survived it. But I want to thank you for knowing that we needed to keep it there. And I'm appreciative, as I mentioned at the last budget meeting, coming from my experience comes from the state of Florida. And to my knowledge, the state of Florida has never given like a $2,500 salary increase to bring anybody up anywhere. And so I think that was very good. And the flex bucks and the holding back healthcare. Healthcare is so important in these days and times. And until the state of Florida does something about expanding Medicaid and having more people being covered, this is like gold, having good healthcare. And so we appreciate that. And I'm looking at the bottom line of what the percentage increases were, and seeing how it was methodically thought out so that those who had less will get more, and those who have more will get less, I think was an equitable way to deal with it. So thank you to all of you, the whole team. Thank you, city manager, because we can't touch you guys, but we can touch the city manager, and he heard us, and the deputy city manager, for making sure that we were all heard, the city manager, deputy city manager, and for the work that you all did to put this together. I am also pleased that the number of positions that are being moved from OPS to permanent, that is also life-altering for families. Because when you're OPS, the state of Florida use that term OPS, is other people's services. They say other personal services, but we used to call it other people's services, because you served at the pleasure of other people, and if they decided, not to be there, for you not to be there, then that changed. But in a permanent position, that provides a level of security for employees. And we're hoping that this trend will continue as people are working like full-time folks, that they will also receive that status. The temporary folks, I know that when I was talking to the city manager about how to look at this, we're looking at college students, we're looking at folks who, this is like a second job for them kind of thing. And so I understand why we're not at 15 yet, but I do know that we're going to strive to get there because we have to, constitutionally, we have to. And I'm glad to see that we're moving along. So we're moving to 10, and we will continue to watch us move towards 15. And I think I saw that somewhere in fiscal year 26, I think is what is anticipated. So I hope to be around. I'm going to hold you to it. Whether I'm around or not, we're going to hold you to it. I'll put it in my wheel. And make sure that it happens. Also for our community partners, I see you out here in the audience, and thank you for what you do. And we know you need money to do it. And so we're trying to do what we can within the millage that we had to hold to. So hopefully we'll get some help for you from across the street. Both places across the street, the legislature and the county, will help us land all those things. So all of those things, I think we've done a tremendous job in trying to keep our city growing and keep our city moving and retain our employees who we value. We value each and every one of you. So no matter what the category is, we value you. And I also want to offer, as I come to a close, for the temporary employees, if you're seeking a career, this is an opportunity to apply for positions with that path. If your situation has changed, you're no longer in college, your finances, whatever has changed, apply for some of those full-time positions and compete for them, and hopefully you will be successful in getting them, bringing the experience that you've already earned. So again, thank you all so very, very much, each and every one of you. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Robert and company, for what you prepared so far. Good work, I think, on a lot of the employee compensation. The only thing I still think we need to strive for this year is to go ahead and raise the minimum wage for all employees to $15 an hour. Minimum means minimum. That should just be the base. And I know we can talk about temporary employees and part-time employees, but I don't know anybody who comes to work for fun. They come to work because they need to get paid, they want to get paid. We can talk about retirees, high school students, college students, rents going up on retirees, rents going up on college students, and I've had the pleasure of employing multiple TFLA high school kids over the past few years, and I tell you, they need that money just as much as anybody else. You know, a lot of these kids, I mean, they're helping their parents put groceries on the table. They're helping mom pay the utility bill. This isn't just fun money to go to the movies after school. Not everybody comes from a background where they have parents that can help them pick up the slack. Many kids are actually helping their parents. So when I look at the overall impact presented of $1.7 million of the general fund to get us there, we're looking at 1% of our budget. 1%, we can be a real leader in this community of setting the floor at $15 an hour. Some of them may want to transition into full-time employment in the future, but they're going to work every day because they need to get paid, and the cost of living continues to increase. So if we want to be the city that is really setting the standard for what wages look like in our community, we don't need to wait for Amazon and other big companies to come here to do it. We can do it right here in our government. So respectfully, I would request that we continue the conversation of raising the minimum wage for all employees to $15 an hour.
Commissioner Porter, are you with us for comments? Any comments?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I want to echo what's been said about just this. The presentation was really helpful and all the attachments. I had a few questions. So there were some comments about the deficiencies fund. I know we're about, what is it, $6 to $8 million short of where we'd like to be per our policies. And I thought I heard it said that it's something that we're going to be working on recouping over the next couple of years. I guess my question is, if we approve the sale of properties later today for that $8 million, will that bring us to, the level we want to be at?
Robert?
I expect that you're referencing the Chevron and St. John's property.
Yes.
If I recall the details of the agenda item correctly, the sale ultimately may reach closure in fiscal year 23 for the first parcel. The second parcel may reach closure of the sale in fiscal year 24. I think as we proceed through 22, 23, 24, we'll assess how much of the FEMA money is available and returned to us, and then portions of those sales, yes, would depending upon what level we are at for the deficiencies fund, relative to the general fund, again, trying to identify 2/12 of a percent of the total general fund, then that would bring us very close to fully funded the deficiencies fund, yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Okay, thank you. My other comments were just, I really did appreciate the breakdown, the non-career versus career employments. I agree with Commissioner Matlow. I would like to continue this conversation, and I would maybe have liked to see some more options for us here, but I did appreciate the breakdown, and it did make sense to me. My final comment, and maybe I have some questions too, if anyone's available to answer, about the radio replacements. I kind of feel like this needs to come back to us at a commission meeting, or, I mean, it's so much, it's a lot of money. And I guess I just have questions about, you know, if we've had any problems with our current radio systems, if we are moving ahead of schedule or on schedule for this. I'm just curious, just because this is such a large investment. I understand it's not for this fiscal year, but do we have any more background or comments on that?
Mr. Manager?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can generally answer those, and we've got some experts with us that deal in that every day. The radios that are in place today, they're the public service radios serving the entire public service network, the sheriff, EMS, fire department, police department. They're at the end of life. They've been at the end of life for several years now. We implemented a strategy to stockpile some spare parts. Our radio shop has done just fantastic work keeping them alive, keeping them reliable. But we have reached the end of life and necessitates a next version upgrade. They're very expensive, but they are long life assets, and we do have a very good radio shop that maintains them. So once you make the investment, you try to take advantage of it for as long as you can. So we're really at just the point of next generation upgrade.
Commissioner Porter?
Okay. Thank you, Reese. And, I'm prepared to move forward. The only thing is I just want to reiterate my commitment to seeing us get all employees to 15 an hour as soon as possible. So I hope that we can continue that conversation. Thank you.
Excellent. The motion on the table is for staff recommendation, items 1A through E, properly made by Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Williams-Cox. Commissioner Richardson for comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a real quick comment, and I'm sorry that Kate left before I made this comment, but I wanted her to know that we have heard what they have said about our Animal Services
Correct.
Center. I have a former neighbor, Leslie Carlisle, and I hope she's listening or watching. She's an avid animal rights advocate in our community. I can't tell you how many calls I get from Leslie about issues involving animals in our community. She just called me recently about the fireworks in Tom Brown Park and the impact that has on our animals. And so I want Kate to know that we have heard what they have said and have been asking for, and I hope, Mr. Mayor, that we will make that a priority in the very near future, because it is an important issue that we have to deal with. Our facilities are not totally adequate for the services that we provide, and so I would hope that at some point in the very near future we begin to address that issue. I know it's a blueprint project, but it's like out 20 years, and I just don't know that we can wait that long to begin to address the issue. And I also wanted to mention the deficiencies fund as well, as Commissioner Porter mentioned. I do have some concerns there, but I know we have a plan for addressing that. And as long as we stay on course for addressing that deficiencies fund over the next few years, then I'm comfortable with that as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Commissioner Richardson, just to add on to your comments, I think you expressed it well, but we do know the animal shelter is a blueprint project. It's at the back end of that. And you and the commission have consistently expressed the animal shelter to be a priority. And, I want to commend Robert and his team for trying to explore ways to accelerate that project. So we hear you loud and clear, and I think Robert and his team, they'll work with their counterparts in the county as well, and really do our very best to come up with a solution that advances that project.
Mr. Cook, you want to weigh in?
Thank you, Mayor. I do, one, I want to make a quick comment on the deficiencies fund, but before I do, I heard more than one of you say you appreciate staff hearing you. We always hear you. But I want to compliment Robert and his team for what they've done, because we hear you. Sometimes the request is a heavy lift. And at the last budget workshop, I thought you put a challenge in front, whether you knew it or not, and to be able to creatively address compensation. So a year ago, you said, we can't afford to give anybody a raise, but we're not letting anybody go. That was a big signal for employees. I get to keep my job. And then at your last workshop, you said, we want to address the compensation and do so immediately, and to be able to respond like they have with some focus as was presented deserves commendation. And so I appreciate the work they did, and I'm sure the employees will as well. The other thing on the deficiencies fund, I think it's important there, as Commissioner Richardson said, we'll be paying attention to it over the next couple of years. If you go deep into I think there's an attachment to the agenda item, not the presentation, but the agenda item that talks about the deficiencies fund, and it has a chart that goes back to 2008. So at the end of the good times, just before the financial crisis hit us, the target and the balance were identical. And you'll see the target just incrementally goes up because it's a percentage of our budget, but the balance dropped because we needed it, because of the difficult financial times we were in. And it went back up, and the balance reached the target. And now it's down a little bit below, but we've demonstrated you as a commission and your predecessors have said consistently that that's important, and so the staff knows that you plan proactively. You can't address it all in one year, whether it goes up or down. So I think the property sales and the other things that have been talked about, we've done this before, so I think the public can rest assured that we'll do it again, but I think you're very right on point to identify the issue.
Thank you. Motion's been made. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Passes unanimously 5-0. Do we have any other business to come before us at the workshop?
No, sir.
We stand adjourned. See everybody at 3 o'clock for the regularly
Great
scheduled
job.
city commission meeting.